So, Carrie, let's talk about best interests. It's NRS 125B.0035, subsection 4, gives us 12 different factors the court has to consider. And the Nevada Supreme Court says, court, you have to consider every single factor. I want to kind of get into some of these. The first one is the wishes of the child. If the child is of sufficient age and intelligence to assert a preference. And I don't know, I'm sure you guys get this all the time. Oh, they're 13, now they can assert a preference, which I always laugh. I'm like, no. And I think a lot of these post-decree cases we see is where we're getting children into teenage years, where they're now saying, I want to live more at mom or dad's. So, tell us what kind of your thoughts on that factor, how you've seen it apply, and how it works.
Certainly. So the first thing that I always say to my clients, and I get this from doing some work with the Children's Attorneys Project, where we have children who are our clients, but I tell it to my divorce and custody clients, children get a voice, but not a choice. No matter your child's age, at no point are we going to say to them, where do you want to live? Okay, great. You get to live there. That said, again, depends on the facts, depends on the case. I've seen children as young as 5 years old interviewed in a custody case. I've seen children as old as 11 or 12 where the court says, the facts that you're giving me, mom or dad, are not enough for me to pull this child into this litigation. So it's, again, very fact specific. As children get older, obviously, the court's going to say, okay, there's a likelihood that they may have a little bit better idea of what might be in their own best interest. Or I want to hear from them because they're the ones with the real information. If a parent comes to the court and says, I want to change custody because my child doesn't like it at dad's house because XYZ, what is that because? And sometimes the child is the best provider of that information. But sometimes the other thing that we get from a child interview, which is how we're going to get that information, we're not going to get it. The judges used to just sit down and chat with these kids. We don't do that anymore. We have third parties doing these interviews. But the judge will get some information about what the child's concerns are. Why does the child not want to be at the other parent's house? And a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times that interviewer can sometimes opine a little bit too on, is this child being coached? Do we think this child's is saying this because they really are concerned or have issues? But the other thing that we want to look at is, again, the court's not going to change custody because a child wants to live at mom's house because mom has less rules, because mom doesn't make him go to school, these sorts of things. And so the other thing that I always tell my clients in these cases is, listen, if your child came to you and said, I don't want to go to school today, you would still make them, right? So just saying, I don't want to go to dad's house is not enough for this factor for the court to say, okay, well, then you don't have to go to dad's house. So the court's going to take all of these things into consideration. And again, on the issue of the child custody, the child interview, we have our mediation center down here does child interviews, but you also can pay a private person to do a forensic interview of a child. But the other important piece to remember is it's not automatic. A child interview is not automatic. So you can go to the court, you can request your modification of custody or just a child interview. I mean, sometimes people will go and say, a child is reporting the following things. Can we please have a child interview to determine if a modification would be appropriate? And it's going to be up to the judge at that point whether they're going to allow that child interviewed and take that into consideration for the further proceedings.
I really liked your saying the child has a voice, not a choice. That's a really good way to describe how this factor works. And I think we could do a whole nother panel on the child witness testimony law and how you get those children to testify before the court, even above and beyond an interview. So